That's fine, but I have some specific information on what is eligible. I do want to have a chance to say what the final rule says. Yeah, and I'm very good. I'm looking for yeah, thank you for guiding me. Yeah, just like that lady. In the first meeting, right? We just came on all the utility girls. Got to get to work. Folks, thank you for your patience. We'll be starting in just a minute.
Hello, everyone. No house rules going high. My name is Gina Roberson. I am the special advisor to the mayor, community affairs. If we could turn our cell phones off, and if you don't want to turn it off, I understand, put it on vibrate. Because the ring-a-ling-a-lings of the phones, and you try to turn it off in the middle of a conversation and everyone turns around and gives you the evil eye, we don't want them to do that. But this is our 4th public comment meeting about the ARPA money. Can this thing move? Because I'm leaning over. Yeah, oh, now it's taped down, so I still got to lean. I'm pulling this up. Yeah. I can change the rules. But this is our 4th meeting for the ARPA funds, and our other 3 meetings have been great. The questions were good. We want to hear from you. We want to be, how can I say this? Real good stewards of the money that the government has given us to make our city a better place. So with that being said, who do we have here tonight? Julie from Northwestern Financial is going to give you a brief overall of what the money is for. My favorite part is she's going to tell us what you cannot do with this money, because everybody have all these great ideas. I love it when she says, no, we can't do that. No, I'm messing with you. I like the part where she says, yes, we can do that. So all your ideas, we're writing them down, we're recording them. Hi out there in TV land. Good seeing you guys again. But without further ado, here goes Miss Julie.
Thank you very much, Gina. Thank you, Gina. Thank you to the mayor, the council, and the city of Harrisburg for having me here tonight. My name is Julie Needham. I'm with NW Financial Group. And tonight, I'm going to tell you about a little bit about the American Rescue Plan, the funds that the city of Harrisburg has been allocated under the plan, the eligible categories that you can use the money for, and some of the examples. And as Gina alluded to, I'm going to go into some details about some of the things you can use it for and some of the things you cannot use it for. Then we're going to open it up to discussion for all of you to ask your questions and to give your ideas about what would be a good idea to use the money and any questions that you might have about whether it is or is not eligible. And to be clear, there's two different parts to this conversation. Can you use the money for whatever your wonderful ideas are? And separately, what is the city ultimately going to do, which is the city's determination with all of your input. And we'll be talking more about that in a minute. I want to, sure, absolutely. I would be glad to. Thank you for giving me that advice. I want to welcome everyone who's on Facebook Live. If you have any comments or questions, you can put them online, or you or anyone can email questions or comments to communications@harrisburgpa.gov. That's communications@harrisburgpa.gov. Okay, so let's do it. The American Rescue Plan, what is it? The American Rescue Plan was a $1.9 trillion stimulus bill that was passed in March of last year. $350 billion of this money has been dedicated to provide money to state and local governments. The states all got some money, the counties all got some money, the cities all got some money, and the towns all got some money. The city of Harrisburg received an allocation of approximately $47 million. The federal government has written up guidelines on what this money can and cannot be used for. It's called the final rule, and it's 437 pages long. So I, of course, will be giving you a summary tonight and examples and not reading you all 437 pages. The objectives of the American Rescue Plan are to maintain public service, to fight the pandemic, to provide support for struggling families, businesses, and industries due to the pandemic, and to provide long-term growth by building a strong, resilient, and equitable recovery. The final rule divides the eligible uses into four main categories: public sector revenues, public health and economic response, premium pay, and infrastructure. So category one, public sector revenues. The city is required to make a statement as to its revenue loss due to the pandemic. It can either take a $10 million standard allowance, or it can make a calculation based on the specific circumstances of the city. And there are guidelines in the final rule as to how to do that calculation. Up to the amount of the revenue loss, the city may use that money for all of the eligible things I'm about to list in a moment. It can also use it for general government services, meaning a wide variety of activities. So the revenue loss is somewhat less restrictive for that slice of the money. Beyond the revenue loss, any uses have to fall into one of the next three categories. Category two, public health and economic response. This includes COVID mitigation, medical expenses, behavioral health care, responding to and preventing gun violence. It also includes assistance to certain households or communities, to unemployed workers, to small businesses, to nonprofits, and to impacted industries. This category has a lot of information about what kinds of services can be used for all of those categories and to whom it can be given. We've had a lot of questions about this, so I'm going to circle back to this category in a minute and give you more details on it. But first, I'm going to finish categories 3 and 4. So we did public sector revenues, we did public health and economic response until I come back to it. Category 3, premium pay. The city could have a program whereby it gives payments to certain essential workers who performed essential work during the pandemic. The final rule has a lot of information on the definition of essential worker, the definition of essential work, and the restrictions on the amount of money that could be provided in this program. That's premium pay. The fourth and last of the big categories is infrastructure. The city may make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. Some examples in this category include sewer repair, lead line replacement, green infrastructure, water conservation, or culvert replacements. So that's the four main categories. And now I'm going to circle back to public health and mitigating the negative economic responses. The final rule, the federal government has divided up this section into three slices. One slice is money that can go to anybody. Another slice is money that can go only to impacted households. And the last slice is money that can only go to disproportionately impacted households and communities. And you're about to hear about all that means in just a minute. So let me start with the first slice. Money that can go to the city or to anyone in it. So this includes responding to the public health emergency, such as vaccination programs, testing programs, contact tracing, COVID-19 equipment such as ventilators and ambulances, PPE, ventilation systems for public facilities and congregate living facilities, mitigation strategies for small businesses and nonprofits, emergency operations centers and emergency response equipment, and public telemedicine for COVID-19 treatment. In addition, in this slice of public health and economic response for everyone, that also includes medical expenses, unreimbursed expenses for medical care for COVID-19, paid family and medical leave for public employees, or treatment of long-term symptoms of COVID-19 would be some examples of that. In addition, still in the slice of for everyone is a category called behavioral health care. Examples of this include mental health treatment, substance use treatment, peer support groups, hotline services, opioid outreach, and behavioral health facilities. And finally, in health for everyone is responding to and preventing gun violence. Examples in this include services for victims of crime, community policing programs, or technology and equipment to support law enforcement response to gun violence. All right, that was public health for everyone. The next slice is public health for impacted households. What does impacted mean? The final rule says that impacted is for low and moderate income households, or households that experienced unemployment, or households that faced increased food or housing insecurity, or households that qualify for certain federal programs such as CHIP or Medicaid. So what does low or moderate income mean? That's the key part of this, impacted households, low or moderate income. There's a whole definition related to federal poverty guidelines and area median income. The federal government has provided specific examples for Dauphin County, Pennsylvania, depending on your household size. So if you're a household of 3 and your household income is $65,000 or less, you qualify as an impacted household. That's what they consider moderate income. If you're a household of 5 and your income is $93,000 or less, again, that would qualify you as moderate income and you would fit under the impacted household category. So what kinds of services might the city use its money for impacted households? Again, that's low or moderate income, primarily is what we're talking about here. Examples include food assistance, emergency housing assistance, health insurance coverage expansion, benefits for surviving family members who've died from COVID, job training, burials, home repairs, home weatherization, internet subsidies, cash assistance, paid sick, medical, and family leave programs, assistance in applying for public benefits, childcare, tutoring, or affordable housing. And we will be talking more about affordable housing. I know there's a lot of interest on that topic. So we've talked about public health for everyone. We just talked about public health for impacted households. Finally, there's another category of public health and responding to the negative economic impacts for disproportionately impacted households and communities. What does disproportionately impacted mean? It means low income, or that you live in a qualified census tract. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Or that you qualify for certain federal programs such as SNAP, free and reduced price lunches, Head Start, or Pell Grants. Those are examples. There's a longer list of qualifying programs. So what does low income mean? So low income means for a household of 3, less than $40,000. So I'm not going to go through all the numbers here, but this is to give you a feeling that, or to help you understand what's available in the guidance. If the city decides to do certain programs, it's going to need to check that people fit into these categories. Okay, so the low income is disproportionately impacted. The other important concept in disproportionately impacted is qualified census tract. What is this? The federal government has taken the whole United States, drawn little boxes on the map, and labeled each one a census tract. And there's a map on HUD's website that shows this map. For those that meet certain income thresholds, it calls them qualified census tract. So these low income tracts are literally colored purple on HUD's website. So I have a map here of the city, and most of the city is in fact in qualified census tracts. There's a couple of pieces of the city that are not. So if on HUD's website, a household lives in a qualified census tract, again, you can put the address in, see where it is on the map. It's either purple or it's not. It's disproportionately income impacted, and certain additional services can be applied. In addition, if it's in one of those qualified census tracts, there are certain services that can be given to the community there, to the area there, to the neighborhood. So what are those? What are those additional services that are eligible for disproportionately impacted households or neighborhoods? The city can pay for community health workers. It can remediate lead hazards. It can provide primary care clinics. It can provide housing vouchers. It can make investments in neighborhoods, including outdoor recreation features. It can do improvements to vacant and abandoned properties, and it can provide assistance to high poverty schools. So we've talked about, to recap, the city has gotten money. It's been allocated $47 million. It got half last year. It's going to get the other half soon. It must obligate the money by the end of 2024. There's a variety of things that the city can use. It's going to be picking and choosing with your input, and that's what you're here for, and that's what your officials are here to listen to you, to hear what's important to you as they make judgments, because there's a lot more things you can use this money for than eligible uses. There's no question about that. So you all as a community are going to be making some hard choices. There's guidelines about what's eligible in general, what's eligible only for certain qualifying households or communities. If the city spends money on things that are not eligible, it may be audited in the future by the federal government and might have to give the money back. So that's why it's important to do this carefully. And the last part is, again, I want to emphasize that as you share your interests, there's two parts to the answer. One, which I and the folks I work with at my firm can help you with, is answering, is it eligible? If you want to do contact tracing, yes or no, is that an eligible expense? And we can say, yes, that's eligible. The second part of the question is, what are you all, the city, going to decide to do? And that's not, my firm is here to advise as to eligibility. You all will be having that conversation with yourself, with your elected officials going forward to make those decisions. In 1 second, I'm going to open this up to comments or questions. And I want to and then after that, after we have this conversation here, we've received some questions and concerns and comments and suggestions that were emailed in. So I'm going to address that after we have this conversation here. For those of you who might be watching on Facebook and wondering if we're going to get your questions answered, we will get to that. That was a lot of information. All right, over to you. Who has a question, a comment, a thought? And please come to the mic if you would like to. Yeah, and then I'll probably restate your question also to make sure that everyone can hear it as well.
Good evening. My name is Rhonda Mays, and I'm representing the Fair Housing Council of the Capital Region. And I guess I had two short questions. Of course, we're focused on maintaining affordable housing and closing that gap between the necessary housing stock and what's available for the residents of the area, the community. So my question is, if we have the inclination of reading the final rule, is there a link to that on the website, on the city website? And maybe.
Well, there's a link to it on the Treasury Department's website, and we can certainly put a link on the city's website if there isn't already. Let me answer in some detail about housing, because we've heard this from a number of folks. So if you don't mind, I'm going to give a longer answer to the question that you asked. So to recap, the question is affordable housing. Is it eligible? And there's the final rule has two parts to its answer about affordable housing. And this is a longer answer than you asked, but I do want to get this back because we've had multiple questions on this. The first part of the way that the final rule addresses housing issues is through emergency housing assistance. And so this relates to impacted households. Again, we talked about that would be low or moderate income and people facing housing insecurity. So the kinds of services that can be provided with respect to emergency housing assistance include rent, mortgage, or utility assistance, counseling and legal aid to prevent eviction and homelessness, housing counseling, housing outreach services for survivors of domestic abuse or human trafficking, specialized services for individuals with disabilities or seniors that support their ability to access or maintain housing. This category also includes financial assistance to allow homeowners to reinstate a mortgage or pay other housing related costs related to forbearance, delinquency, or default, mortgage principal reduction, facilitating mortgage interest rate reductions, counseling to prevent foreclosure, and relocation expenses following eviction or foreclosure. So, and emergency assistance for individuals experiencing homelessness and transitional shelters are eligible. And let me just step back 1 second. When I say eligible for anything, it means on the face of it, the final rule says you can do it. Before the city goes ahead and has builds a transitional shelter, for example, it's certainly going to go through very carefully, and we're going to look at all the specifics to make sure everything works out with that. So I'm not going to say that over and over again tonight, but I just want to give that little disclaimer. So that was emergency services, which was not your question, I don't think, but it relates to housing. And it might be that to some extent, some of what you all are trying to accomplish might be addressed through some of these kinds of services. Also, the final rule has a section on promoting long-term housing security. And this is where it talks about supportive housing or other programs to improve access to stable, affordable housing among individuals who are homeless, and development of affordable housing to increase the supply of affordable and high-quality living units. This is a long section. I'm going to give you just a few key points, and we might circle back to this. So in order for this to be eligible, it needs to be responsive to the needs of impacted populations. And that includes being in a qualified census tract. We talked before about those areas that are designated as low income on HUD's website. It also includes addressing providing long-term housing to address housing shortages. And these must be responsive to and proportional to the harm identified. So it has to increase the supply of affordable housing for low-income individuals, households. And we've heard a number of projects proposed about selected housing for selected groups, for youth, or for seniors, or for various other slices of people who need housing. The final rule says that affordable housing developments targeted to specialized populations are also eligible. For example, recovery housing for individuals in recovery from substance abuse. And it goes then into some detail about how you would support the argument that some other group of people would be impacted. You have to do an analysis based on data. For example, if you wanted to have a program for seniors, not necessarily low-income people, but seniors, you would need to do an analysis based on data that supports that seniors are an impacted population in the city of Harrisburg. So there's a whole conversation here that we won't go through for all the other folks. But bottom line is, yes, affordable housing is eligible. Yes, there's a whole conversation about it. Yes, it can be targeted to certain populations other than simply low income. And would your particular project be eligible? I don't know. Maybe. It would need to require analysis and data and a specific look at where it is, who it would be serving, and how that population, the data for that population looks relative to the population. Is that?
Oh, thank you for the really, really very detailed response. I appreciate that. But I did, I have one more question.
Sure.
So it was my understanding that the city was waiting for the final rule to be published and received. So now that that's happened, when do you anticipate that the applications and proposals are going to be available for submission for organizations to submit?
Well, the city right now is accepting proposals. So if you have ideas on how to spend the money, now is the time. When the city is going to make a final decision, I'm not going to speak for you all, but
There's
You
not-
you will be thinking about it.
Is there a specific grant application?
No.
Oh.
The link should be on the city's webpage, but if it's not, the link should be on the webpage. If it's not, it will be added to the page. But we're not finished with our public comments yet. So once we get finished with the public comments from the community, the city council and the mayor's administration will sit down and come together to see what we will do with the money. But what date, we don't have a final date for that yet. We're still in the planning process, getting your input as well.
And so anything you want to have happen with the money, you can email it to communications@harrisburgpa.gov. And there's no separate specific application. Okay.
Hi, I'm Caleb Kosick, 222 Boaz. I also work at CCU Help Ministries. I'm on the rental assistance program there. Since Rhonda was talking about housing, I figured I would just do my little comment here. So in December 2020, this is all about rental assistance. The city of Harrisburg used a $500,000 grant to run a citywide rental assistance program, which was successful. It was all distributed, but however, at that time, the need for assistance was so great that the funds were dispersed, with well over half the applications obviously unable to be processed because the funds had been all spent. So since that time, a couple months into 2021, Dauphin County, obviously not what we're talking about here, but related to rental assistance, Dauphin County has been distributing upwards of 26 million. I think they've got about 18 million out so far, and there's another 8 to 10 million left to be distributed. However, pandemic eviction is still an immediate and ongoing threat. Pandemic eviction for rental arrears, the subsequent displacement of families in our city continues to pose a very significant threat to public health, but also to education and to safety. Most vulnerable of all, I'm going to say, in my opinion, are children in the school system whose ability to receive any form of education is severely compromised by something like being evicted from their home. I don't think children should be evicted during a pandemic. This also threatens the elderly and or immunocompromised, as when children and their parents or guardians are displaced, they usually consolidate intergenerationally, which increases the risk for viral transfer to the elderly. So the rest of this uses some data from public data from the Unified Judicial System. So around 5,200 evictions were filed in the city of Harrisburg in the year 2022, according to these public records in the judicial system, Unified UJS portal, I guess, online. Taking into account census reported percentage of Harrisburg households with children, you can estimate around 120 households per month with children are facing eviction in the city. So eviction of children and their parents or guardians is an issue that can and should be addressed via both city and county funding streams. And it should be considered a key element of pandemic recovery. So currently there's no program designed specifically, and I say specifically, to target and safely safeguard and swiftly safeguard households with children who are facing eviction. So all those things together, swiftly target, specifically target households with children who are facing eviction. There is eviction prevention, there is emergency rental assistance, but there's nothing that targets families of children, especially children in the schools, because that data could potentially, it's in the school system, you can verify them, et cetera. The difference these allocations could make to the lives of Harrisburg children should not be underestimated in any of our conversations about pandemic recovery, in my opinion.
Thank you, sir. To recap, in case I'm recapping because I know on Facebook they can't always hear what the question was. So the point that this gentleman was making is that eviction prevention and rental assistance are very important, particularly for families with children.
Right.
And so to recap, in terms of eligibility.
So, yeah, do you mind? I don't mean to interrupt.
No, that's
one thing I was thinking is if you're facing eviction, I mean, you're in the county court system. Your address is verified, the landlord is verified, their address is verified. Therefore, we can safely say that they meet the impacted standard, right? Because they're facing housing instability. They could be locked out of their house within the next 30 days. Does that sound accurate?
That sounds accurate. So to recap, in order to qualify for emergency housing assistance, which rental assistance and eviction services fall into, you need to qualify as an impacted household. Impacted household means low or medium income or facing housing insecurity. So by definition, as this gentleman correctly pointed out, if you have been given an eviction notice, you are facing housing insecurity and would therefore be eligible for these assistance programs. To recap on what's eligible in this emergency housing assistance section: rental assistance, mortgage assistance, utility assistance, assistance paying delinquent property taxes, counseling and legal aid to prevent eviction and homelessness, emergency services or services for homeless individuals, including temporary residences for people experiencing homelessness. So this category is clearly an eligible one. I heard what you said, that your thought in terms of structuring the program would be to target households with children
Who are facing eviction.
who are facing eviction. And that certainly has been heard by the city. So thank you very much for that contribution.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Denise Hill. I am the Director of Building and Housing Development for the City of Harrisburg. And I just wanted to make a couple quick points related to some of the comments and questions that were just recently made. Can everybody hear me? I just wanted to first point out that the mayor has met with a developer who is looking to build 40 affordable homes in the uptown area and is also committed to building more in the areas around the city. And then I also directly related to Mr. Kosik's statement that was provided, just wanted to also mention, and I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but the school district also received ARPA funds to address exactly what you were referring to. They actually received more than what the city did. And they also have a homeless liaison, which I have direct contact with to make sure that we are assisting residents in the city and in the school district. And then also you were correct that $500,000 in rental and mortgage and utility assistance was dispersed to the city. But in addition, council and the mayor was a part of this, reallocated an additional $500,000 of funding because the need was so great. And once we got through the initial $500,000, there were still a great many of households who needed the assistance. So the council and the administration did see the need for it and made sure, which we are still currently processing. So my office is currently processing we're down to about 80,000 left of that. And we also have a partnership with Capital Region Water that they are directing city residents that have a past due balance for a water bill directly to my office to apply. So I just wanted to make sure that in addition to the ARPA funds, that there are programs being run out of the city that are addressing a lot of the things that you're saying. I also wanted to mention, just for the record, the mayor has made a commitment, it has been and always has been, to affordable housing and homelessness. I am working very closely with her on a daily basis to make sure. So everything that is being submitted is being heard, it's being taken into consideration, but I'm encouraged because a lot of what I'm seeing is in line with the administration's plans. But again, it is very, very important. And it is crucial that everything is done above board and in the proper way. Absolutely. The mayor just pointed out, you can dial 211 from a cell phone and you will be connected directly with Dauphin County Human Services. They are also running an ERAP program or emergency rental and assistance program. They have just upgraded their website so that you can check the status of your application in real time. There are a number of organizations that are assisting with that. CCU is one of them. So is there anything else that I missed? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Hello, my name is Noah Irwin, just here to express some comments and support for using the ARPA funds for the cash assistance. I think that you had mentioned earlier for families that have been negatively impacted by the pandemic. So it can be structured in many ways, but the general idea is to provide families with guaranteed, no strings attached payments for a set amount of time. For example, you could use $12 million of ARPA funds on the program that would provide 1,000 families with $500 per month for 2 years. Making the funds restriction-free allows families to decide for themselves what to prioritize. People know what's best for themselves. There's a lot of precedent for using ARPA funds in this way. The Brookings Institute put together what other cities have been doing. And by my count, at least 10 other cities are considering or will be doing a program like this. Also, the city of Stockton, California, a couple years ago, conducted a direct cash payment program for 2 years and found that full-time employment rose by 12 percentage points among those who received the funds. And also their financial, physical, and emotional health improved. Most people spend the money on basic needs like food, home goods, rental payments, whatever they might need, clothes for their family. And this puts money right back into the local economy, which boosts employment and other opportunities in the city. And I think more importantly, the recipients expressed being healthier and had enhanced well-being. Take it from Laura, a participant who said, before the program came along, I was paying a lot of bills and didn't know how I was going to eat. It's like being able to breathe. So I think investing in our families in this way is a great thing to do. And thanks for your time and attention.
Thank you. So to recap, this gentleman was proposing that a portion of the city's ARPA funds be used for cash assistance to impacted households on perhaps a monthly basis for several years, and was instancing the various benefits that his research has shown in other communities. And cash assistance is an eligible use for impacted households. Again, that means low and moderate income or other qualifications under the final rule. So thank you for your suggestion, and that has been heard. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Amy Hill. I live in the 700 block of Green Street. I am also the chairperson of the Broad Street Market Alliance. And hello, Mayor. And in my day job, I work for the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank. So I think one of the secondary stories to a worldwide pandemic has been widespread food insecurity, and the city of Harrisburg has not been spared of that. While there are signs of recovery are very encouraging, I think what the pandemic did is revealed how vulnerable people can be to food insecurity. And where the Broad Street Market comes in is access to fresh, healthy food that is affordable, is an important part of having food security in our community. So the pandemic certainly put a strain on the market. We were able to maintain and stay open. There was a period of time where just a handful of vendors, those who sold the fresh fruits and vegetables and meats and fish and those kinds of really basic needs, stayed open. But it certainly put a strain on the Broad Street Market to maintain all of that. So the forward momentum that we had been planning for and organizing and stepping slowly towards a capital improvement plan has been pretty much put on hold and certainly puts the market in a vulnerable position. So my question is, could we submit an application for some of the capital improvements that would help to improve the efficiency of the systems, the utility systems, but also to create spaces that allow the vendors to sell more fresher food and some of those types of things. So that is my question. And I think my question about an application process was already answered. So thank you for that.
So the question is, can the Broad Street Market, could ARPA funds be used for capital projects for the Broad Street Market, which is a purveyor of foods of all kinds, but includes fresh foods? Is that a fair summary? Okay. So the answer is that there's two different eligibility categories that I think would fit with this. The one that's most on target is aid to impacted industries. The final rule has a whole section on how funds can be used for industries that were impacted or disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and what they would qualify for, but it specifically references hospitality and tourism industries. The other part of the final rule that, so capital projects are also an eligible category or topic. There is a discussion of additional qualifications that you have to go through to justify the use of funds for a capital project. But there's a whole section in the final rule on capital projects. So as a category, it's an eligible category. Whether your project would specifically fit, we'd need to go through specifically and look at that. And then the last part of it is food assistance and food banks, which is, your question is really more about an aid to an impacted industry. So that's where I would start for the Broad Street market. But food assistance and food bank, those services are eligible for impacted households, which again is low and moderate income or people facing food insecurity. So whether or not your capital project works out, I'm sorry, excuse me? Oh, so whether or not your capital project works out is a yes, maybe. And the city could also do food assistance and services, which might involve what you do, which is kind of two different answers. I would recommend that you write a detailed write-up about the proposed capital project, how much it would be, and also you would need to talk about to what extent you faced revenue losses during the pandemic. At this point, I'm not saying you should write 30 pages, but 4 or 5 good paragraphs rather than a sentence to get us through the next look.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm Kate Gillis-Hanna. I'm the Executive Director for Brethren Housing Association. I think Kyla's here somewhere joining me from Shalom House as well. I'm jumping on the affordable housing bandwagon here, so I appreciate it. I'm actually overjoyed to hear the mayor's commitment to affordable housing. It's so needed, and there are so many organizations here doing really great things. Brethren Housing Association is one of them. We provide bridge housing for single mothers and children experiencing homelessness. And this is Kyla from Shalom House. She's a new executive director there as well. And there's a lot of housing people out here tonight too. So thank you all for coming. I'm actually here representing a group of us because not everyone could attend. And so I have some information here I wanted to go on the record with about the need for affordable housing in our area. Nationally, there's this shortage of more than 7 million affordable homes for our nation's 11 million plus extremely low income families. Harrisburg is no different. The Capital Area Coalition on Homelessness, or you may have heard them called CASH, that's who we're here with. They're the lead agency for HUD, for the continuum of care for the city of Harrisburg and the county of Dauphin. They conducted a study to determine the need for housing for people experiencing homelessness and developed some possible housing solutions that we wanted to submit for your consideration for some potential funding from the American Rescue Plan. The study demonstrates a substantial need for the development of new affordable housing opportunities and the funding that this can provide through the city of Harrisburg to allocate resources for some of the cash housing projects. During their 2021 homeless census, known as a point-in-time count, over a 24-hour period, 358 individuals experienced homelessness, either unsheltered or staying at emergency temporary homeless shelters in Harrisburg and Dauphin County. Currently, there's 89 homeless households on CASH's waiting list for permanent housing. Homeless households have 3 barriers that are preventing them from affordable housing. They're extremely low income. Average monthly income for the households on our CASH's coordinated entry waiting list is $846, 20% of the median income for the city of Harrisburg. The current average fair market rent in the Carlisle Harrisburg metro area is $843 for a 1-bedroom, $1,074 for a 2-bedroom, and $1,364 for a 3-bedroom unit. I have moms in my program with 4, 5, 6 children that are working for $15 an hour. Where are they going to live? There is nowhere that they're going to find housing. And so another barrier that they're facing is the high and increased cost of rental housing. And I mean, we all see that happening every day in our neighborhoods. And during the COVID pandemic, rental rates in our area increased by 16%. And I heard today, someone told me 25%. I mean, the rates have just skyrocketed. And then lastly, it's the limited availability of affordable housing. There is no state or county in the country where a renter working full-time at minimum wage can afford a 2-bedroom apartment. So compound that with our lack of inventory, and we have a real problem here. So each year that shortage is getting worse and worse. And that's why people are homeless in our country, why families are struggling to pay for groceries or even getting to go visit their doctors. So BHA and our partner organizations have been feeling the effects of this issue, which have been severely compounded by the pandemic. Our graduates of our program, people that have successfully passed through our different programs, have nowhere to go. And so 5 of us housing projects have gotten together and submitted a proposal in to respond to housing needs. Scholar Inc.'s Thrive program, they provide affordable housing for youth experiencing homelessness, ages 18 to 24, who are aging out of the foster care system and at risk of becoming homeless. So the program utilizes a supportive housing model and provides life skills to help assist youth in maintaining permanent housing. They're looking to acquire a multi-family housing facility and a renovation project proposed through this funding. My organization, Brethren Housing, intends to purchase and renovate hopefully 8 apartment units for permanently affordable housing opportunities for families in need. I'm losing the next one. So that means renting to people at a rent that they can actually afford. We're looking at, we just bought our first permanently affordable property, which means that we're renting to an individual at far below what that market rent is so that she can afford to live and thrive. Fair Housing Council, who was just here, is in on this as well. They plan to renovate 5 apartments for affordable housing opportunities, including 1 fully accessible for an individual with disabilities. Veterans Outreach of PA plans to construct 14 tiny homes on a property that's been donated and approved for this project. And Shalom House plans to develop 14 single room occupancy units for females experiencing homelessness. The program offers permanent housing with supportive services. This funding is potentially a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to make a real change in this city. Please consider allocating a portion of the funds to affordable housing through the affordable housing providers that are the boots on the ground addressing these challenges each and every day. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. So to recap, that was a discussion of why affordable housing is important and the programs that this organization works with, and a request that these programs be considered for funding. And we've discussed the context of the eligibility. So thank you very much.
Glad to see so much support for affordable housing here. It's thrilling. I have one question. It may not be exactly, geared towards the program, but the Fair Housing Council has received a state grant to do a planning proposal for the Camp Curtin area. And I heard Ms. Hill say that a developer has plans to build 40 affordable housing units or housing units in the uptown area. And my comment to that is, it's great to build housing. Fair Housing Council is, has done a great deal of work in the eviction prevention and landlord tenant and home buyers in the community. Now we're getting into direct housing for the LMI community, as has been discussed. But as far as the planning grant is concerned, I'm also interested, or the council is also interested in the communities being very well planned out. We want dignified, walkable communities that people will have access to fresh produce, such as the renovated Atlas building. They have green space, they have home ownership opportunities with building in the infill in uptown. So, and the community being part of this process. So my question is probably to the Honorable Mayor Williams. Is there an opportunity for the organizations that have been working on this plan that was funded by the state to meet with you and to present what the architectural renderings and the other plans for affordable housing being built in that area for homeowners and renters? You know, a lot of, and the families are really important, but we found that with cash, that 60% of the individuals facing housing instability are single households, one person. So part of
Fridays is resident. Any citizen resident of City can come on Fridays from 9 to 5.
Oh, okay, that includes organizations.
It's called my executive assistant.
Ms. Hill?
No,
Or
Lisa.
Lisa? Okay, all right, great.
So to recap, there was again, interest in affordable housing. And this organization would like to meet with the mayor to present the specifics of their programs. And the mayor said that Fridays are open for her to meet with residents. And you just need to call her office and make an appointment for any Friday. So that's individual residents or folks who are representing an organization.
Yes, just one final comment
Yeah.
about that. Specifically, my concern is that, you know, developers and nonprofit organizations that are planning on building affordable housing for the community, we don't want to be stepping on anybody's toes. I mean, this is the first that I heard about a developer coming into Uptown to build 40 units that could, you know, kind of clash with the plan that is being presented to the state. So I would hope that any of the organizations we can kind of, you know, coordinate together and work with the mayor to make sure that we don't have any kinks in the process when we're trying to complete these projects.
Thank you very much. That was a request for coordination among these different affordable housing projects. Again, I'm restating what you said in case the folks on Facebook can't hear as well, which we've seen in some of the meetings. So thank you very much. What else? Who else has a question, a comment, a thought?
Hi, my name's Elise Kazar. I live right up 3rd Street near Kelker. I have a quick question and then maybe a little more complex question.
Okay.
Homeless people who do not shelter indoors, do they qualify as being part of the blue census tract? If they don't have a legal address?
So the question is, for homeless folks who do not have a legal address and therefore don't live in a qualified census tract, for example, would they qualify to receive services? The answer is yes. One of the definitions of impacted households are people facing housing insecurity. So by definition, someone who's living on the street is facing housing insecurity. So yes, that would be eligible.
Okay, my second question is really about the mechanics of how the funding works. You had mentioned that the money needs to be obligate, I think you said by the end of 2024.
Yes.
And I'm not sure exactly what that means, but what I'm wondering is whether the city needs to look at all the proposals on the table within the next short time frame and package up how it wants to spend $47 million now, or can the city embark on programs that address the people with the most precarious situations and see how that unfolds and see how situations might change between the pandemic, the economy, anything before deciding what the next phase might be?
So the question is the timing of committing the money and spending the money. This is a great question. There's a couple of different parts to the answer. So in terms of what the final rule, the federal government requires, you have to obligate the money, that means committing to spend it by December 31st of 2024. You have to expend the money by December 31st of 2026. Actually, the money checks out the door, actually spending the money. And the final rule discusses this primarily in the context of these big projects, building a water treatment plant or building affordable housing, that these things take a long time. So they've given, as it were, an extension for actually getting the projects completed. So there's what you have to do, which is that you must obligate the money by the end, commit to spending it by the end of 2024, and you must expend the money by the end of 2026. Then there's what would be a good idea to do. And one part of a good idea is to make plans early, and one part of a good idea is to wait and see a little bit. And let me address both of those. So one reason that the city is well advised to be doing exactly what it's doing, which is thinking now deeply and in conversation with all of you about what needs to be done and what the priorities are and how to allocate the money, is that a lot of these ideas that are on the table take a while to implement. So if you want to build affordable housing, if you want to, demolish a tract of land and get environmental permits and build a large building, for example, that takes a while. And while it might seem that 2026 is a long way away, it's not really that long when there's a lot of issues to sort out and other people to consult with and things that are unexpected that come up. So one part of the you don't have to, but it's a good idea, is to make some decisions soon about some of the money. The other part about what's a good idea, you don't have to, but it's a good idea, is that you want to think about what money needs to be saved for the future. This money that you've gotten this is all that there is. This 47 million, you're not getting any more from the American Rescue Plan, right? And so we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And maybe we think this is great, COVID's pretty much done, we can all relax, we don't have to worry about it, but you don't know what's happening next winter. You don't know what's happening the winter after that. Maybe there's another variant, maybe there's some other problem that comes in. And what you think is a good idea right now would be to do priority A, B, and C. And what might be true is that in 2 years, what you think you really need are a lot more ambulances and a new health clinic and a specialized, hotline for people to call into. So this is not what the federal government does not require that you save any money for the future. You could take all $47 million and spend it on your sewer repairs today. And I'm sure actually you could put all that money in the sewer and it would be gone. Well, there is that. So you don't have to spend money on any of these specific uses. You can choose to spend it in one category. You can choose to spend it you can break it up into a lot of different pieces. You can spend it all now. You can wait until December 31st of 2024 and spend it all then. So you have a lot of freedom to choose what to spend it on and when to spend it. Those are my thoughts on it. But the federal government gives you a lot of freedom with certain deadlines. There are so there's that 2024 deadline and that 2026 deadline. And if you don't spend it, they will take it back. I'm sure you won't have that problem. But I encourage you all also to think about, while you have these priorities that you think are the most important today, give some thought to what might be coming down the road.
Hi there, Rachel Goad at 500 Graham Street. I had two quick things. One is that I've been really glad to hear so much interest in and support for affordable housing and housing relief. And I just wanted to lend my voice to that, and in particular to say that focusing funds on people who've been most impacted over the past couple of years seems critical, especially as it relates to folks who have been dealing with eviction. We haven't had a moratorium for some time, and there are a lot of folks who've been really endangered by that. So I hope that we can get some money going as like direct relief to people who are experiencing that. The second point was really a question for the city. I understand that there is a reporting deadline on March 1st. And I also hear what y'all were saying about the timeline is sort of fluid and we're like figuring it out. And this is sort of back and forth at this point. But I wondered if the city could shed any light on what y'all are planning to include in the March 1st report, given that all these
I can
sessions
speak
will be
to
wrapped up.
what the report is about. So, all right, so there's two parts to what this comment was. The first was the lady adding her voice in support of affordable housing and housing services. And so that has been heard and expressed. Thank you. The second part of it was asking, so does the city need to make interim reports to the federal government, or does that all wait till the end? And if so, how is that going to work since the money has not yet been allocated or spent in large part, right? Is that a fair question? Yes, right. There's an upcoming reporting deadline. So the answer to the reporting question is yes. The city has to make quarterly reports as to its use of the funds. And the federal government provides a form of that. And the city is going to need to report on what it's obligated and what it has expended. And it has to make those reports in the specific categories that the federal government has provided. There's a 2-page document with, if you did contact tracing, it's this number. And if you bought an ambulance, it's that number. So there's reporting categories that the report has to specify. But for the money that has not been obligated and has not been spent, you do not have to give details on what you think you might spend it on. It's a what have you done so far type of report. Does that answer your question?
Good evening. My name is Tom Zimmerman. I'm president of Veterans Outreach of Pennsylvania. We are a nonprofit organization for the homeless veterans, Transitional. And the question that I would have is, if we do qualify through the affordable housing, what is required from the organization as a reporting? Is there prevailing wages? Is there different categories and so forth that would be?
This is an excellent question. Okay, so this gentleman is asking about affordable housing projects. And the question is, beyond this is a good idea, we think we should do it. His question is, what's required in regards to reporting, and what's required in regards to prevailing wages and labor standards and other guidelines. So the city is getting about $47 million. It's called a recipient. And when it hands out money, it hands out money in one of two ways. It's either handing out money to what the federal rule calls beneficiaries, meaning ultimate receivers who are getting helped by the money. So if you give money to somebody for food assistance, they're a beneficiary. If you give money, you can give money to nonprofits as beneficiaries, meaning if there was a nonprofit organization that lost a lot of money due to the pandemic and is struggling, or if you give money to grants to small businesses because they lost a lot of money due to the pandemic and they're struggling, you can do that. And if you give money to nonprofits or small businesses as beneficiaries, meaning they're being helped, there are very few reporting requirements. Alternatively, the city can give money to nonprofits and to other organizations to perform services on its behalf. So if the city wishes to address homelessness or address gun violence or address opioid use or any one of these eligible categories of problems to be addressed, it can do so directly, right? The city of Harrisburg could itself build affordable housing, but it could also give money to nonprofits to provide these services on its behalf, in which case those nonprofits are called subrecipients. The city is the recipient, it takes money and gives it to someone else as a subrecipient to do an eligible project or to provide an eligible service. In this case, the subrecipient, meaning the nonprofit that's providing the services, must use it for eligible purposes, must keep good records. The city is required to monitor the use of funds and to take those records and turn around and provide that reporting to the federal government. So there are significant reporting requirements for nonprofits that are subrecipients, again, that are providing services on behalf of the city to accomplish its eligible goals. The other part of your question was prevailing wages and safety standards, and there's a whole variety of labor restrictions. And long story short is that the federal rule strongly encourages that that firms or nonprofits that are providing services for the city have those, pay prevailing wages and have high safety standards. And there's a list of a bunch of things in that category, but it does not require it. And my thought would be that as the city is going through its decision-making process, that when it's making final decisions about where to allocate the money, it might be asking those questions of potential subrecipients. You know, what are your labor standards and so on, and what do you do? Do you hire union workers and those kinds of things? So that's one of the details of the guidance where it's recommended but not required, and that might be an input for the city's decision-making process.
One last question.
Sure.
So it seems as though there's going to be quite a bit of affordable housing, construction and renovation. And the Fair Housing Council takes great pains to hire minority contractors and residents of the city to complete our projects. Does the city plan to have, may not be part of the ARPA, but specifically, but does the city plan to utilize or create a diversity plan for these construction projects? Specifically for the ARPA funds. If you get ARPA funds for the renovation or the building construction, do you also need to abide by a diversity plan?
So to recap, the question is, with respect to affordable housing projects, does the city plan to include a diversity program as part of its development of affordable housing? And I would interpret you're proposing that would be a good idea.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So that was a vote in favor of a diversity program. Already done is the answer.
Specifically for the ARPA project.
And Governor Acting that it's a private government. It's also going to abide by the city's guidelines for diversity.
So the mayor just said that the city has a program to look at diversity and will be looking at that with respect to projects going forward.
Good evening. I'm Gloria Vasquez-Merrick. I'm the Executive Director of the Latino Center. And so I'd be remiss if I did not mention the Latino community in the context of the conversation. And I say that because I think these are all great ideas. ideas that I probably would have brought up. But I think we need to make sure that language barriers and diversity are considered when it comes to approving all of the grants. Approving all of the projects that we're talking about here, because housing impacts the Latino community, the Somali community, and a lot of other communities that aren't necessarily present here. So that's very important to me personally and on behalf of the community. So I also wanted to talk about the community health worker and to make sure that that's that a broad definition is used, a wide net is cast in terms of what those community health workers can do. There are social determinants of health that aren't necessarily addressing health issues per se, but that impact individuals' health, such as their housing, their employment, and a lot of other things. So at the Latino Center, we could greatly benefit from community health workers, or what I would call community outreach workers, that make sure we encapsulate all of those things that are being addressed here today. So that's the one big thing is, I know one of the barriers that we have at the Latino Center is that we are a referral and outreach center. So when we refer someone to Salvation Army or to any other organization, and they need help when they get there, these organizations are looking for the cook, the secretary, or someone who can help translate. So I think somewhere in the policies or maybe in the grants or however, that there's language in there to ensure that we're talking about diversity within the diversity, and that language barriers are being considered and addressed in the context, again, of everything, whether it be fire, police, whether it be housing or whatever. So the other thing is, I think that there are a lot of organic organizations in the city of Harrisburg. And I think that attention should be given to a lot of those organizations that are not national affiliates. Because one of the struggles that we have is that we are a boots on the ground, organic organization helping not just the Latino community, but all faces of the community in Allison Hill. And so one of the challenges that we have is long-term sustainability. So I appreciate everything that the mayor and her team has always done as a part of city council. And I look forward to further collaboration with the Latino population. And like I said, all the faces of the community that we help in Allison Hill. So attention to the organic organizations and attention to language barriers and diversity in that respect for not just Latinos, but like I said, there's a big influx of Somalis and a lot of other populations that I'd like to speak for. And then I already mentioned about the community health workers. So the question that I still have is, you've talked about long-term sustainability and the fact that the money has to be spent by 2026. So if you get the monies early, then you have a 4-year, almost like, can you write your grants in a way that you're taking into account that long-term sustainability for the project that you're addressing? Or do we rely on other funds such as CDBG or other funds that might be available down the road? Or, I mean, I'm optimistic, but.
Let me, those are great questions. Thank you so much for sharing that. And there's a couple of different things here, and let me address them in pieces. In fact, I'm going to kind of work backwards. The last thing you talked about was whether your grants that you write should look at the long term over multiple years or be specific to a short-term grant, and whether it should be targeted to ARPA money or looking at other sources of funds also. So the first thing I'm going to say is that as of right now, as far as I know, there are no specific requests for proposals out relative to this money. that this is a brainstorming part of time where the city is looking for input and looking for ideas. And so you are very welcome to send in your proposals to communications@harrisburgpa.gov, but there's no particular grant to write. The other part of that was your saying, maybe it would make sense for the good work that you do to be funded not just from this money. And certainly there are other sources of funds for all these kinds of good works. And certainly it makes sense for the city and for the nonprofits that are engaged in this to look at those other sources of funds and leverage this money to try to accomplish other things. So that's a preliminary answer. And it may be that there comes a time when the city decides that it does want to specifically address, rental assistance, let's say, for specific people. And it decide, I'm not saying it will, but hypothetically, if it did, one choice the city would have would be, it can pick people that it wants to work with. It can just go ahead and say, this organization, we would like to work with you. Or it could put out a request for proposal and say, we've decided to spend X million dollars on addressing, this specific problem. Let's say, emergency housing assistance, and we're asking for proposals from different organizations. And at that point, there would be a document for you to write. There would be specific questions and you would answer them and you would provide documentation. So that's part of the choice the city has in how it figures out how to proceed with tackling these different topics that you all have brought up. The federal rule encourages but does not require a transparent process, including, for example, a competitive request for proposal process for large projects. So it is a possibility, but not a requirement in how the city makes its choices about giving money to subrecipients or other nonprofits. The second part that you raised is that you are a local organization and that your hope would be that to the extent the city is making choices about where to put its funding, that it would prioritize local organizations versus national ones. Again, that is an option the city would have. It is not a requirement. So I'm not going to speak for what the city will do or should do. I'm responding to what does it have to do? And the answer is it could prioritize local organizations. The other issue that you brought up is community outreach. Community outreach is an eligible use of funds in disproportionately impacted communities. That means being in a qualified census tract or being a low income community as defined in the final rule. So again, as with everything, the city is not required to do this, but it could fund community outreach workers for disproportionately impacted communities. And finally, you talked about language barriers, and thank you very much for raising that. Certainly, the city is, I know that because they've spoken to me about their commitment to being open to being in communication with people who speak all different kinds of languages. There is a language hotline where the translation can take place for any of this. We also have a Spanish speaker here tonight, if anybody would like to have anything clarified in Spanish. You also can email communications@harrisburgpa.gov in Spanish or in any other language, and it will be translated. You'll get the response and it could come back. Melissa, would you like to come here and say that you can?
Yeah, Melissa used to work for me.
Okay, would you like to come up and say you can email communications at harrisburgpa.gov in Spanish?
Go right ahead. I'm proud of her. Let her.
I'll let the friends and family of everyone tell people that. But it's so. So thank you for raising that issue, and I know you've been heard, and that is a consideration that the city I know cares about.
Yeah, and I'll just say that the city has always been very supportive of the Latino Hispanic American community, but I think now with the pandemic and COVID, Our services have increased 300%. We're just since April provided 24,000 services to the community there, new and repeat services. And it's just become exacerbated. And so I think, it's time to think about a little bit more about sustainability for the only Latino center that exists in this entire region. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I also want to note that Harrisburg City is the only city that received ARPA funds that's doing community public meetings. No other city is getting their input from their residents.
Among our clients, I'm not going to swear that's true for the whole country, but yes.
Lancaster's not doing it, none of the surrounding cities. We're giving you an opportunity to say what you would like for us to do with this money. Whereas other cities, they're deciding what they're gonna do and just like do it. Okay, so I just like to throw that in there. We care what you think, okay?
Good evening. My name is Nelva Wright, and I'm the health officer for the city of Harrisburg. And I will just piggyback on what was just said. I think it's very important for the community to have some input as we move forward with these ARP funds. So I'm glad to see this is happening. I just wanted to put in some requests for an information request, actually from the citizenry regarding a health bureau here in the city of Harrisburg. We are a third-class city, and we do have the opportunity to use some of the ARPA funds to start a health bureau. We have been very blessed in Harrisburg because we do have the Department of Health that has been very, very supportive of the health office, Department of Ag. We've had a lot of support. However, it would be very advantageous for the community to actually have a Harrisburg-based health liaison, if you will. So a lot of the programs for the health department will be looking at disease state management, chronic disease, overall health and wellness. Mentioned food security was mentioned earlier. So all of these things are very important and can be coordinated through the health bureau and also with some of our partners like the hospital systems here and some of our clinics such as Hamilton Health, et cetera. So I just wanted to put it out there that we would love to know what people would like to see in the health bureau and that we're hoping to make that commitment here in the city of Harrisburg to increase the quality of life, increase the occurrence of good health, and to reduce the occurrences of illness and disease here. COVID has brought that to the forefront, that there is a need for liaison services and a need for people to have representation and a unique representative regarding health issues here in the city of Harrisburg. So please feel free to reach out. Again, my name is Nelva Wright, and I'm the health officer, and I would love to hear from you. Thank you very much.
So that was a health officer with the city of Harrisburg talking about a proposed health bureau and liaison services and encouraging the residents to reach out and give your thoughts. I will say that health as a category is eligible with respect to the American Rescue Plan money, and specifically also data analysis and hiring additional employees for purposes related to health services and to data analysis is an eligible use. So that would be certainly something that would fit as in this context. Thank you. All right, well, you all are thinking of some more good questions. I'm going to tackle a couple of ones that came in by email. Okay, we have one about housing. I think we've talked about that tonight. We have one about trees, planting trees. So this would go in the category of neighborhood improvements, and therefore it's eligible in disproportionately impacted communities. So certainly all of the qualified census tracts it would be eligible in, and so the ones that are not qualified, it might or might not be eligible. We would need to look at the data to see if you could make a case for that. But in general, neighborhood improvements in disproportionately impacted communities are eligible, and tree planting and tree maintenance would be qualified. And so that was a request. I know the city has received that information. there is a request for seeing the money spent on water and sewage infrastructure improvements. And specifically, and also clean water for the Susquehanna. So that's absolutely an eligible use. That entire category of necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband certainly includes water and sewer projects and clean water projects of all kinds. I will say also, just as a quick mention while we're talking about this category of infrastructure again, that there's other things that are specific in that category that don't need to be huge water and sewage projects. So the city could do targeted smaller investments, for example, culvert replacements in areas that it's flooding, or climate mitigation, such as putting in porous paving in parking lots or on roads, or green roofs, lead line replacements. So there are certain examples in this infrastructure that aren't, let's take 47 million and put it all, in the sewers. But certainly you can, as much as you want, put money into the waters and sewers. And then 1 second, this was more about housing. I'm not going to go through that one again. Okay, the next question is blighted properties and or home repairs. Let's take those one at a time. So blighted properties is definitely an eligible use with respect to disproportionately impacted communities. You can demolish or repair abandoned buildings. You can fix up vacant properties. You can do greening of empty lots. There are some restrictions here that you can't do things that result in less housing for people. But aside from that, the other part of this is that this request comes from Habitat for Humanity. So all that conversation again about subrecipients, meaning if the city gave money to Habitat for Humanity to repair blighted properties, Habitat for Humanity would need to keep records and the city would need to monitor the use of those funds. The other question is home repairs. That is definitely an eligible use. It's under the impact households category. So again, that would need to be for low or moderate income households or those facing housing insecurities or those other qualifications. And I think that's what I've got here for the questions that were emailed in. Anybody else have any good ideas? Come on up.
Lucky enough, great. Stumbled into your guys' meeting today, and it sounds like you guys have a bunch of money that's available to the city. And what I've heard from several of the people that have asked you guys questions this evening is, how can you get that money into the hands of organizations that are already doing good? I mean, I know it sounds a little bit general, but there's groups, or organizations, very simply like the YMCA or whatever, where they're already servicing the community or the different cultural groups or the different neighborhoods and things like that. How can you guys tailor the allocation of those funds into the hands of people that are already doing good?
Thank you. So the question is, it seems like a good idea. One good idea would be to take the money or a large part of the money and get it into hands of organizations already doing good works in the city. And certainly that is one of the methods or one of the ways that this money can be used. I want to clarify that there's other objectives that the final rule talks about. So yes, it would be possible to take the entire allocation and give it to nonprofits to do eligible services. So that's a possibility. But I want to point out that the final rule talks about the importance of the city continuing to function and perform its core services. So there is a lot of information here. For example, about the fire department, the police department, the city functioning potentially remotely when needed, or functioning when people are out sick or quarantining. So I'm not saying that that's, again, what the city is required to use the money for, but I wanted to balance out that all of these great ideas are wonderful ideas, and they're predicated, I think, to some extent on making sure that the city is functioning and behind the scenes, where you expect, of course, you pick up the phone in 911 and it gets answered. Well, part of that is the dispatchers being funded and having the equipment they need. And during COVID, those kind of departments really got hard hit. So I'm sure that city is in communication also with its departments, its health department, its fire department, its emergency services, to hear what they need also. So you may not hear that tonight because the police department isn't here saying this is what we need, but I know that those conversations are happening.
My name is Kyle Harvey. I am the executive director at Shalom House, and everyone here had really great information. I am so pleased to hear that affordable housing is, up on the platform. And I just kind of really wanted to speak from an emergency shelter stance and how the housing crisis has affected sheltering. Our women have been staying in our house, which is a 22-day shelter, for about 6 months to a year, because there is no housing out in the community that they can afford to transition to. I'm so thankful for Kate and her transitional program, because some of our ladies are able to move over there. But this pandemic has created, not only are they homeless, but they're stuck with their kids in a small house with other families. So I've seen moms lose hope. I've seen depression increase. I've seen kids' behaviors, go, to the left significantly just from being placed and being in a shelter. So the affordable housing crisis is major. If we can't move our ladies out into permanent housing, then we don't have bids available for the next woman who is going to be homeless. I would like to thank the mayor and her team. They have helped us tremendously be able to keep our doors open during the pandemic. We have a little bit of hoteling money that we're able to, hotel people if our house is full. And that has been a huge help, but this housing crisis is major, and I see it every day. And it breaks my heart when I go to work and I'm seeing ladies saying, Miss Tyler, when do you think we'll be able to move out? When is the house going to come available? Do you know any landlords? And I have to say, no, I don't know, but we'll keep you here safe as long as we can. So I appreciate all of the comments and all of the push for affordable housing. And I also appreciate the mayor and her team just hearing us out.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So this was another voice in support of affordable housing, particularly in this context with respect to transitional housing and temporary housing. But of course, it's all part of a connected picture, as you pointed out. One thing I want to piggyback on you also is that you were mentioning that part of the issues that your clients face sometimes is mental health issues, and perhaps understandably related to their circumstances. But I wanted to say again that mental health services and behavioral health services are an eligible category under the final rule. And there's a lot of detail here on things that you could do in this category. You can set up mental health facilities. You can have telemedicine that relates to mental health. You can have a hotline that relates to mental health. Again, I'm not saying that the city can or should, will or should do this, but there's this whole conversation about behavioral health and mental health services that is very much an eligible use. And there's a lot of details in here on how that could be provided. So I know your main point was about housing, but you did bring out the mental health issues. So I wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
If I could just add one other topic, just related to the conversation that's going on in relation to ARPA funds that are being received in additional CARES funding. Council will be still allocating funding from 2020 for CDBG that has been mentioned, CDBG and ESG. And also my department, the Department of Building and Housing, runs on a federal fiscal year. So a new allocation of funding is scheduled to come in around October. I'm just waiting for notification from HUD, which is separate from the ARPA funds, but we would be notified of how much is coming into my department, and then applications would be open. So I'm glad that Julie mentioned about continuing the core functions of the city as it relates just to housing, because I know that's been a topic here tonight. Those services will continue in addition to any of the plans for the ARPA funds that council and the administration and the mayor plan to move forward with. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Wesper Matrix, I'm a member of City Council. First, just want to thank everybody for their attendance. We've had a few of these already, and I don't want to steal anyone else's thunder, but this is one of the larger public participations we've had thus far. So thank you all for coming out. I guess two questions. Well, first a comment. I'll note while the city is receiving $47 million, the school district of Harrisburg has $50 million in ESSER ARP funds, as well as the county of Dauphin, which we are the seat of government, has $54 million. So there's a lot of money coming to our region. That's just those three entities, but across the Commonwealth and specifically South Central Pennsylvania, there are a lot of funds to go around, and communities are going to be looking for ways to use those to the best suit their needs. Questions. One, can those different organizations or municipal bodies that have funds partner together to try to stretch those funds out a little bit? And then same thing for any subrecipients. So for instance, a nonprofit receives, if we do a program that benefits nonprofits, can they use any of this money as match money for any other programs that they may have that they may be in partnership with in order to stretch those funds? $47 million sounds like a lot of money, but if you look at, I used to serve on Capital Region Waters Authority, we have $500 million worth of infrastructure needs just in the Capital Region Water Service Territory. So, even if we spend, as you mentioned earlier, all of that money on all $47 million, that would be 1/10 of the infrastructure needs that we have in our community. So just look forward to hearing your responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. So there were two questions there. The first was explaining that the county got an allocation of money and the school district got an allocation of money. And the question is, can the city partner with the county and the school district? So the answer is yes, certainly you can do regional projects, and certainly it's a good idea. And certainly it's a good idea if the school district is already going to buy everybody a laptop. Maybe the city shouldn't buy everybody a laptop. I'm just saying, you want to know what else is happening around you so that you make the best use of your money. I do want to clarify that the money for the county, it is able to give a portion to the city, but it is not required to. So the county money isn't to be sliced up and given to each of its constituent municipalities. It might choose to do that. It might choose to do regional programs. I know that the city is in conversations with the county on what its priorities are and how the county and the city can work together. But I just wanted to clarify about what it can do and what it has to do. The second question was whether the subrecipients, such as meaning nonprofits to whom the city might give money to perform services on its behalf, whether subrecipients can use ARPA money as matching funds for federal programs. There is a section in the final rule that talks about it can under some circumstances and it can't under other circumstances. And I am sorry, I cannot recite that off the top of my head, but I would certainly be glad to look into that and give you a definitive answer. I will just say that I'm going to put in a plug for this lovely restaurant that we're spending our evening in here. They were very gracious in hosting me. I had a delicious dinner here. So I thank them for this lovely venue and their hospitality tonight. We're here in HMAC. Okay, any more questions? Any other thoughts? Folks, thank you again for coming out. Thank you for your concern. I know that the city is listening very carefully to your concerns, your thoughts, your priorities. Again, if anyone is watching online, you're welcome to email communications@harrisburgpa.gov with any suggestions or questions. And we look forward to continuing this conversation. There's another outreach meeting tomorrow. I have that address. So that meeting tomorrow, for those of you who didn't get enough tonight, or those of you who are watching online and feeling left out, is from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the Nativity School of Harrisburg at 2101 North 5th Street. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you guys for coming out and good night.